Jesus never said, go to church on Sunday or else. Hey guys, it's John sitting here in my living room having a fabulous, fabulous day, drinking a mug of broth, enjoying my process of going into my fast. I wanted to hop on and talk about this concept that we're supposed to go to church every Sunday. You know, in the Bible, they talk about honoring the Sabbath. Well, the Sabbath is Saturday. Sunday is a Christian addition that was never spoken of in the Bible. Sunday is something that was added to make the weekend function better for Christians. But why is it that we feel like we need to go to a church? The Christian churches are giving you the place to come, to congregate, to connect with God. And, you know, a lot of, you have to get married in the church. Everything's about being within the church confines. If you're a Catholic and you want to get married in a park or on a beach or something like that, there is a process of getting special permission to do that. And that's because the church says, no, this is against our rules. You're supposed to do this in the church unless we deem it to be okay. But is church required for their connection with God? The Bible says, look under a rock and there I am, right? Under a rock. It doesn't say in a church. It says, I'm everywhere. I'm everything. I am around you at all times. And when you look at this from the perspective of why are they saying come to the church? It's because it's the one thing they can control. Come to the church. You come within the doctrines and confines of this religious dogma and come to us. The sayings that are attributed to Jesus are always talking about your direct connection to God. The Father and I are one, and you must become one with me as I am with the Father. The kingdom of heaven is within you. Ye are God's. Everything was about you and your direct connection to God. It wasn't until Paul's writings, when he said it's the direct connection through the death and resurrection of Jesus. He's the one who's saying that, you have to be a Christian. And Jeshua was saying, go directly to source. You are one with God, and you have a unique and beautiful relationship with God. And you can ask mountains to move, and it'll move if you have faith, if you believe it. He didn't say faith in him. He never once said faith in him. But this idea of Sunday is another addition. It's just like Paul added the concept of Christianity and this idea that you have to get saved through the death and resurrection of Jeshua, Jesus. Later on, there's many other additions that happen to the Bible as well. The Trinity is a later addition. I think it's 3rd century is when that came into play. There's so many things that have been added along the way, and one of them is this idea that Sunday is the day of God, and if you miss a mass on Sunday, it's a mortal sin. And that was one of the things that scared me as a child, was this idea of missing a mass on Sunday was a mortal sin. And I missed mass to go play putt-putt golf with my brother. And I was a terrified child thinking I was going to burn in hell because of that. The book of John says true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. It doesn't say you'll worship the Father in a building. It doesn't say you'll worship the Father the way the priest tells you to. It says you'll worship it in spirit and in truth. In other words, being the non-corporeal, being your truth, living that essence of love. God is love by being the connection. Now, of course, uses the term Father in the book of John, but I don't believe in a male external patriarchal God. I don't believe in that sort of ideology, but it's talking about connecting in spirit, in your beliefs, in your feelings, because our spirit is projected into our life through our feelings, and he's literally saying, honor God through your feelings and through your truth. That's why you always hear me talking on my channel about how I'm only speaking my truth, because that is the way I honor God, is to know this truth for myself and live it fully. And I'm not saying that there's one truth. People all have their own subjective opinions. I only share my truth because it works for me, works great for me, and I'm not fearful, and I love people. So it comes down to the final commandment. I leave you one commandment: love one another. Is it going to church or is it loving one another? And to me, it's loving one another. So I just live into the loving idea of this. In the book of Luke, he says, the kingdom of heaven is within you. The kingdom of heaven is within you. If it's within you, you don't need a building. You don't need a structure. You don't even need a religion because it's within you already. You don't need to go somewhere and learn a new method, modality, mantra, prayer, dogma, and doctrine, any of it. It's already within you. And it comes back to this idea that why am I going to church on Sunday? Joshua never said go to church on Sunday. He said the kingdom of heaven is within you, according to Luke. And, early Christianity was a movement, and Christianity is an interesting thing. The Christianity itself is, leaning into that messianic belief. But Jeshua's early Jeshua's early groups, churches just meant, communities of people, basically. They were teaching love one another. They were teaching compassion. They were teaching, being one with God. And it wasn't until churches began to get institutionalized and theologians started adding things and changing things that suddenly you had these structures of going to Mass on Sunday rather than the Sabbath. And so it really comes down to understanding that you're leaning in when you're following the rules of going to church on Sunday, you're leaning into the doctrine and not the teaching. You're leaning into the institution's framework as opposed to just the simple truth of loving one another, is what Yeshua said in the Bible. Over the course of years, things were formalized. Constantine brought the Nicene Council together to figure out what they were doing and formalize things. And when you look at what they did, they had a big council to say, what do we believe? What are we doing? What's the church? They created an institution, and the buildings, the churches, are part of that institution. Jeshua's church was the teachings, what he delivered, loving one another, caring for one another, being that person of kindness. That's the teachings of Jeshua. But this idea of the fear-based doctrines of missing church and you're going to burn in hell is really just part of that institutionalized ideas that have become the framework around Jeshua. And they seem to have forgotten the teachings. Fear no evil. And yet everything they're talking about is fear-based. In the book of Matthew, Jeshua said that the Pharisees had empty rituals, and they were promoting legalisms. They were these are the laws, these are the rules, and he basically called them out for it. Called them out for these ideas of empty rituals, these masses and things that have to be done and have to be attended. They're empty rituals. True spirituality is loving one another, going out in the world and sharing that love and compassion that he spoke of, and Buddha spoke of, and Krishna spoke of. He who knows not kindness has no faith, is what Muhammad said. It comes down to that kindness, and that loving is the Mass. It is the ritual. It is the church. It is the experience. But the empty rituals of, turn the mug 3 times, sip this, take that, do this, light the candle, swing the incense, that's all empty ritual. It's empty ritual. Are you loving? Are you caring? Are you loving one another? That's what it comes down to. Because if you're doing that, then you are already doing the work of God. And you don't need a church to do that. You need to be out with other people so that you can share the love of God openly with everyone. I leave you one commandment: love one another. Jeshua overturned the carts of the temple, the money changers' carts. Why? Because they had made the temple a place of business. They've turned it into a place that should be a place of contemplation and spiritual attainment. They turned it into a place of business. I remember being in the sacristy one time with the priest, and a family came back to say hello. And the first words out of his mouth was, "I haven't seen your envelope this week." He hadn't seen their money that week. He knew it. He knew everybody in the congregation and whether they sent money in that week or not. Because it's a business. It's become a business. They have a lot of properties all over the country, and they buy new ones all the time. They're doing that with money, and they're doing that with money they're getting from the people they're bringing into their religions to promote that religion further. And it really comes down to they've commercialized it. It's no longer love one another. It's no longer, feed the hungry and clothe the poor. It literally is now, I didn't get your check this week. That's what it's become. And Sunday is the place where they pass the plate. They're passing the donation plate, right? The baskets go out. And those baskets become the money that runs the church. And most of that money runs the church. It's not going out to the poor and the needy, most of it. Most of it's paying land taxes and all that other stuff that keeps those buildings intact. You don't need the building. They could sell all the buildings and feed more poor than they could possibly in 10 lifetimes. They could take that money that's paying for those buildings and the electricity and the hot water and all that stuff, and they could create the donations online. People could send their money in, and they could take that money and give it to the poor, right? But they don't, because they have this building that is where you're supposed to go meet God, and if you don't go there, it's a sin. So it really comes down to, what is the true spirituality? What is the true teaching of Jesus? Is it come to church on Sunday, and if you don't, I'm going to be mad at you, or is it go out and love one another? That's the biggest question,
And now a quick word from our sponsor. Coffee Time with John. This channel runs off coffee, so get your coffee and tea at johnsjoe.com.
If Joshua was here today, would he be standing in a mega church like Joel Osteen or any of these guys and be blabbing, saying this, and then talking about his new airplane and talking about his limousine and his multiple houses and sharing his millions of dollars and all the gold he's wearing and everything else? Would Joshua do that? No, he'd be out in the street loving one another. He'd be out talking to the poor and helping the people who are in grief. He'd be loving one another. It's churches have become institutionalized, and Sunday, it being the day of Mass, is an added addition to make it a regular practice. And then also on top of it, what it does is it gives them the place where people have to come to give their donations. It literally is, in my personal opinion, it's not loving. It's just business, and they could do more good for people if they would just go out and love one another and teach people to love one another. And that's the goal in life, is to get everyone to love one another, right? I often talk to people in my private sessions who tell me that nature is their church. It's the place where they feel most connected to God. Why is that? Because church does not make them feel like they can exhale. Nature feels like they can go, oh, how beautiful this is. How wonderful that is. Smell that fresh air. It feels so good. They're coming back to the feelings within. God speaks to us in feelings, not thinking. How many people go to church and they sit in somber silence during the service as the priest is reading these horrific things, and they're looking at the cadaver on the wall, and they're having all this turmoil over their guilt and their fault for killing him and all these things. What's the purpose? A weekly opportunity to beat yourself up? Love one another. Go out in the world and share love, share compassion. That feeling in a simple act of kindness, that feeling in holding that door for that person, that feeling within yourself of pride that you did something nice for someone. That is the act of God. That is bringing God to earth. That is delivering God to your fellow person, your fellow humans. That is the thing that can happen every day of your life. It can be just a simple act of kindness, a simple smile, a show of love. Those little things are God. They are the church. They are the expression of Jeshua's teachings. And when we look at this from the place of, am I living into his teachings, or am I paying homage to the institution of the church? What happens is you find out that most people are just paying homage to the institution of the church. And they leave the church and they go out and they do crazy things all week long. And then they come back to church and feel bad about what they did all week long. It's their place of absolution. They go have confession just because they get rid of the bad things they did all week. Why don't they just do good things all week? Because they're not following the teachings of Jeshua. They're simply going to the institution to be forgiven for not doing the things that Jeshua taught. So does this mean the church is bad? No. There are beautiful people in all religions. There are beautiful people in all religions. But I would say the institutions of the churches have lost their way. That's why they're losing so many of their congregations. Over the past 20 years, the Christian churches have lost 54% of their congregations. And the latest Pew study says that that's increasing. People are leaving faster. And I've had a lot of people who send me comments saying, it's not true, the churches are growing. Absolutely not true. The churches themselves are doing studies on why people are leaving, and the Pew Research study says that it's expanding very, very quickly. People are leaving the churches in droves. Why? Because they're finding love elsewhere. They're finding a more beautiful world elsewhere. They're releasing fear-based ideologies. The concepts of these fear-based teachings don't make people feel good. Don't make people feel that connection to God directly. So let me say this. God is not a building. God is not a Sunday service. God is love. And love is delivered outside of the building and inside of the building. God is everywhere and everything. The concept of releasing your fears and anxieties is found in all schools of thought. Buddha says, what you think you become, you create your world. And then he said, the secret to enlightenment is the eradication of the fear. You're creating your world, and he's telling you to get rid of your fear so you can create a good one. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil. Then why are the churches pushing hell when hell didn't exist in Judaism? The word Sheol, I recently discovered, it really just meant the grave. You're going to the grave. Sheol was not a spiritual destination. It was a place the dead went, into the hole in the ground, the Sheol. Hell doesn't come into play until much, much later. The early text of Jeshua speaking supposedly uses the word Gehenna. And Gehenna is a valley, which some Jewish warlord massacred children in, and it became a wasteland. And it's been said that people burned their trash there. It became the place of burning trash and pyres and wastelands. And if you do bad things, you're going to end up in that wasteland with the pyres and the dead bodies. It becomes sort of an idea of you're going to go down a bad path and it's going to take you to a bad place. It wasn't until much later when that hell concept even came into play, and then in the 1300s, Dante's Inferno expanded that, and the churches grabbed a hold of those imageries and created a hell around that. It's not biblical. It's the fear-based ideologies they're using are not about the teachings of Jeshua. They're about keeping you in a church on Sunday to pass the plate to you. And my mom was a beautiful, beautiful Catholic woman who was loving and caring and really did live her spirituality. And there are people who do that in all religions. They could do it more if they released the fears and the anxieties and the doctrines, the dogmas of the religion, and spent that time going out loving one another. as Yeshua taught. My thought on this, guys, is assess what you want to do with your life. Spirituality is a personal journey. If you want to go to church on Sunday and have that experience, that's fine. Just remember the reason why you're doing it. Because Yeshua said, love one another. And if that time could be spent loving one another, it's not a sin. Because the word sin means miss the mark. And the mark that you're missing is loving. And the churches, in many ways, are missing the mark. They're not doing the loving things as much as they could. They're worried about getting enough money in to pay the bills of the building. The building's not important. The doctrines are not important. The love is the most important thing because God is love. You don't have to be one brand of religion. I recently witnessed my sister-in-laws having a discussion about how one of them couldn't have communion at their church because she wasn't Catholic. And so even within Christianity, they're arguing about who gets the body and blood of Christ. And Christian Catholics say, no, you got to be one of us. And so to me, it's like, that's not loving. It's not caring. That's exclusionary and elitism. So my point of this is this. Are you an Old Testament God or a New Testament God person? Old Testament God is vengeful and jealous and delivers retribution. New Testament God is love. Are you an Old Testament God or a New Testament God? And if you're a New Testament God, the most perfect thing you could do for your own spiritual journey is to spend your time loving one another, as opposed to reciting rote prayers, saying the same thing over and over again, thinking it's going to get you somewhere, when in reality, all creation comes within you. Greater works than I've done you will do. It's your faith that heals you. You can ask a mountain to move and it'll move. Nothing's impossible for you. Those comments are not followed by if you go to church on Sunday. And that's my thought on this. You guys have a great day. And I'll talk to you soon. See ya. Bye.